Hey, okay, we're on. Lovely. Welcome back to the Pendle Suite. Good to see Máirín and Emma there. And they're going to be talking to us about a cross-platform conference. And you can see Matrix, Jitsi, and PeerTube. So I will hand over to you good people from Red Hat. Thank you. And we'll give you a very warm ComCon round of applause here.
Hi, I'm Máirín Duffy. I'm a UX designer at Red Hat, and this is my colleague Emma. Emma, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Emma Kidney. My official title is Associate Software Engineer, even though I haven't done any software engineering in a good while. But I mainly help out with Mo in the design team on the Fedora Design side, as well as the community design team as well.
And we're here to talk to you guys today about a conference that we ran using Matrix, Jitsi, and PeerTube, and it was a pretty good success, as you'll learn. And we just wanted to walk you through sort of how we set that up as a sort of case study. Could I have the next slide? Okay, so the project that we work on is called the Fedora project. It's an open source Linux distro, and software freedom is one of the core project values of our community. So of course we looked into could we do an open source stack for hosting this conference. And next slide, please. The conference in question is a conference called the Creative Freedom Summit. It was a virtual conference that we just started this past January. And the conference's focus was free and open source creative tools like Inkscape, PenPot, Blender, the usual. And it was really important to us to use open source and open standards if we're going to be talking about open source software. So that's why what led us to the platform we chose. Next slide. And you'll see on the right, we kind of put together a list of sort of basic considerations if you're embarking on this sort of mission. And on the left, we put our own assessment of our community and our needs. So we were really looking for something that would be low to no cost, using resources that we already had, something that would be scalable, based on open standards, based on open source. And we also needed something that would be approachable for volunteers to help run, people who maybe don't have a lot of expertise in the video conferencing that we could train pretty easily. It's also, the Creative Freedom Summit is a pretty informal event, and it was also single track, so we didn't have to worry about managing multiple tracks. So that is a caveat to the solution that we came up with. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll go into the specifics of the event platform. Next slide, please. Okay, so the core components are an EMS-hosted version of Matrix. The Fedora project has chat.fedoraproject.org as our Matrix server, so that is the server that we use to host this summit. We also use the Linux Rocks PeerTube server, and we already have been using that for well over a year. I'd say probably close to 2 years to live stream our weekly team calls. So we were familiar with it, and we had some confidence that it would work. Maybe not at the scale it ended up working at, but we knew that would be a good solution. And then we also used Jitsi's free tier, and I'll talk about how that worked. But we basically treated Jitsi as a live stage and the PeerTube as a broadcast. Next slide. Okay, so Matrix was basically the home for the conference, using the Element client, either on desktop or web or mobile. You can see here in the screenshot showing what the conference channel looks like. We had the live stream from PeerTube pinned as a widget in the upper left corner. In the upper right corner, we started using Etherpad and we moved to HackMD for various reasons, but we used that to have general conference information. When there was a Q&A going, we would allow participants to type their questions, and then as the speaker answered the questions, we would file it there, which was very handy at the end of the conference when attendees wanted to see what the answers were. And then we had the live chat on the bottom that went through the duration of the conference. Next slide, please. And then this diagram sort of shows the flow of how things worked. So you can see where we had on-camera presenters only. So it would be like one of us as a host and then the speaker or speakers. They would be in Jitsi, so they had camera, they had mic. That was streamed into PeerTube. And from PeerTube, the majority, I would say over 60% of the attendees of the conference went to Fedora IM, which is an EMS-hosted Matrix server, using the Element client to participate in the live chat and watch the live stream. As a side effect of using PeerTube, the live stream was also sent to the Fediverse and as part of the Fediverse Mastodon, and we did note that we had a number of users who attended the conference either directly viewing from PeerTube with the Matrix chat in another window on another client, or they would actually view the conference from Mastodon or a Fediverse federated tool. Next slide, please. So this just shows what the Jitsi looked like. And there's a feature in Jitsi that we made extensive use of. It has a live stream thing. And the way that Jitsi's UI works, it's somewhat Google oriented and YouTube oriented, but we just use the same information. It's the live stream key and the URL, input it into the same fields, and it just worked. So that was how we connected Jitsi over to PeerTube. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this is basically how our live stream looked for various participants. You can see on the far left side, if a attendee was watching us live from the PeerTube website, that's how it would appear. In the middle, that's how the live stream appeared for users on Mastodon. Basically, our channel on PeerTube also has an equivalent account on Mastodon and the Fediverse. So a few weeks before the event, we sort of advertised that. So there were people who were following that account, and they would just do direct from Mastodon to watch the feed. And then you can see on the right how the conference would appear live in our Matrix channel. Next slide, please. Okay, so then the next component that we had that we were kind of forward thinking, and it ended up being a bit of a lifesaver, is we set up a backstage or a green room on Matrix. We used the same logo for the conference, but we inverted it so it was on a black background instead of a white background, so it'd be easy with the icons to figure out where it was. And we basically invited all of our speakers to this room a couple weeks in advance, which was very helpful. It had helped them kind of get acclimated and understand the stack. We could set up test calls with them to make sure things would work. And then during the duration of the conference, we had them come in the room about half an hour before their talk, check in on things, let them know when it was safe to jump into the Jitsi. And we had one speaker who had a work emergency come up who couldn't make their time. And this is where this really actually came in the clutch. We were able to rearrange the timing of his talk so he was able to talk, and we were shifting things around live. So that was a very helpful element of the entire setup. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this is just sort of a little bit more detail on, we had some issues. We were using the Etherpad widget that comes with the Element client that you click add Etherpad. We had some issues where users were having some sort of, they're getting some, I don't remember the exact error. We ended up changing over to just using a custom widget with HackMD, and that ended up working a little bit better. So, but this was very handy to have like the code of conduct, to have the schedule for each day. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, we use this for Q&A. So this was helpful to have just embedded as part of the conference experience. Next slide, please. Okay, and now Emma is going to walk you through some of the post-event and also some of the data that we got from attendance. So take it away, Emma.
Thanks, Mo. Okay, so I'll go on to the next slide there. I actually can't see the screens after freezing on me, so I think I'm on the right slide. So the Create Freedom Summit PeerTube channel. So all the videos were available immediately after the stream ended on our PeerTube channel. This allowed attendees to catch up on sessions they missed on the same day. This enabled better time zone syncing and kept people who may not have been able to watch live involved and engaged instead of having to wait days or weeks for the replays. If you'd like to go on to the next slide, please. So open source auto captioning via Kidney Live and FOSS. So although the videos were available immediately after they were streamed, the recordings were raw and unedited. So once the summit was over, the team and some volunteers took it upon themselves to edit the videos. We added title cards and subtitles. So this was all done using Kidney Live, and the VOSS speech was used to auto caption all of the recordings. It was quite a simple process that I've done myself, and I found it to be pretty accurate in auto captioning, unless it came to the likes of someone with an accent like me, then struggled a bit. But we got there. All that's needed is to go back and double check the captions and make sure they're all correct, and then it's good to go. So you can see on the slide there the editing in Kidney Live versus how the subtitles would appear on PeerTube. So it did work pretty well. If let's go on to the next slide. So keeping the community going via Matrix. So attendees wanted to know if we could keep the Matrix room open once the conference was over, and of course we said yes. At the moment, the chat room sits at 239 members, and it is still active 6 months post-summit. The team had a brainstorming session a few weeks ago about how we can continue to keep the community alive, and we came up with some various ideas. One was an art challenge that is currently running through the month of June. So it's happening now. The theme is open source superhero, and the idea is that you can create an open source superhero using only open source software. So if a little plug here, but if you want to enter, you can find more details on our Twitter, design_Fedora. And if you want to go on to the next slide, so how did it go? So we'll go on to the next slide again. So this is just a screenshot from the viewer statistics from PeerTube. So this graph is specific to the live views, not the views on the video replay. So you can kind of see once the conference starts to spike up, and then once it ends, it flatlines again. You can the peak viewers we had was 76, and overall we had 639 unique viewers spread across 54 countries. We also have a number there for the peak concurrent Matrix chat users. So this would have just been what we would have observed ourselves. So this was 265. So if you want to go on to the next slide. So we also ran a survey after the event, and to do this we used Lime Survey. So Lime Survey is a tool that we use in Fedora to carry out our community surveys. So we were fairly familiar with this platform already. It's also open source, and it gives us some nice graphs at the end to visualize the data. So you'll see some of those in a minute. So from this survey, we got some key takeaways. So social media posts are important to grow attendee base. The most event attendees learned about the event from Mastodon and Twitter, with 70% of the survey responses saying they heard about the event this way. The majority of attendees used Element to attend, so 33% used the Element desktop app and 30% used the Element chat web app. So that's roughly 63% who use the integrated Matrix Element experience. And then the rest watched directly on PeerTube or watched the replays on PeerTube after the event had streamed. Another takeaway is chat is critical to the experience, especially in the case of a virtual event. 35% of attendees indicated they made connections with other creatives at the event through the chat. So yeah, sorry, I lost where I was. So yeah, it's pretty important to events if part of your goal is to enable networking and connections between attendees. So if you could go on to the next slide, please. So you should be able to see a lovely pie chart here. So one of the questions in that survey was, how did you attend the Creative Freedom Summit? So as you can see on the pie chart, Element was the dominant platform for users spread across the different variations, so like Element desktop, mobile and web. So altogether that came to around 40%. And then directly on PeerTube was second with almost 30% of users watching that way. And if you want to go on to the next slide. So here we get to see the countries that attendees were from. So this was to give us some insight to what parts of the world we had some reach. Europe was strong despite the times of the conference catering to mainly US time zones. We then had a large portion from North America, South Asia, and Latin America. Areas with minimal representation, you can see, were East Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. So this gives us some insight to what areas we would want to tap into and spread awareness. So I know myself, I only learned post-event that there's a large open source community in Africa. So for future events, we can reach out to that community and get them involved also. If you want to go on to the next slide, please. So this question here was asking about the experience using Element during the event. So if you used Element, how was your experience? Rate from 1 to 5, 1 being poor, 5 being a seamless experience. So you can see that the majority of responses had a great experience, with no one rating it a 1. So that's always a good sign. And then on the next slide, you'll be able to see it's the same question, just with PeerTube. Again, between 1 and 5, 1 being poor, 5 being seamless. The majority of users rated their experience as being great and even seamless. So yeah, so then on to the last slide then. Hope you enjoyed this presentation. I'll pass it back to Mo in case she wants to add anything else, and hopefully I remained in sync with the slides that were shown, because I still can't see anything.
Yeah, and I guess the main thing that I'd like to point out to you is we've written a blog post that is available at opensource.com, and it goes into a lot more detail, how we set up the platform, how we interconnected each of the different technologies. So if this is something that you'd like to reproduce on your own, you can. It's a nice how-to, and of course, me and Emma and the entire Fedora Design team are available on Matrix to answer any questions you have as well.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions in the audience for these folk from Red Hat? I'm not seeing any questions at the moment.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much. And let's give these folk from Red Hat a lovely round of applause.